Now we are live. Welcome to another edition of the Blackberry Medicine Bag Show. ¿Qué onda la raza? Tousti no tenés si tunela. Osta osta. This is your main host, Blackberry, also known as C Walker, along with my new co-host.
You want me to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Oh, hi, this is Peter Connor Estrada, member of the Pascual Yaqui tribe of Arizona. Nosim Chaniabo Kitamalea. And that just means that's just a greeting for you for today in Yaqui. And Nepopeo Teak, Nepopeo Estrada Teak. So my name is Peter Estrada.
Thank you so much from Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Peter Estrada. Now let's jump into our trending topic, and is Ohio Historic Society settled with the golf course to take back the World Heritage Tribal Site, which is a burial ground, an astronomical place, and also I'm trying to think of the last one. Let me just jump into it. Ohio Historic Society has struck a deal that will allow it to control the ancient cemetery and burial site that works with local golf course. The octagon earthenware are among the 8 ancient areas in the Hopewell Works is the system that's named UNESCO's World Heritage Site last year. And nonprofit state historic organizations takes control on January 1st. And it says it was built between 2000 and 1000 years ago from the Hopewell culture. The earthen wells, the earthenworks were to host ceremonies that drew people across from the continental United States based on archaeologists' discoveries of raw materials, they say as far as west of the Rockies. One second, y'all. Native
And
Americans constructed earthenworks included 8 large earthenworks that were.
is this like a burial mound?
Yes, this is a burial mound. Basically, this is a burial mound in Ohio, basically, and it's also astronomy site, and it's also um. Hold on, let me see where else. What else? It's 3 things basically. It's astronomy place, a cemetery, and a ceremonial site that
Okay.
the indigenous ancient people, the Hopewell people, that's what they called by the Europeans. We don't know what they were called because this is so ancient. Now, the federally recognized tribe, the Shawnee, who are no longer there, well, they're there, but they're not. They have control over it. They're the over ones. They're the stewards that took over. In fact, my friend told me to look up a guy by the name of. Give me 1 second so I can look up this guy's name.
Okay, I know I'd seen a few things lately about how they had the ball courts like for the Aztecs in Mexico, that they actually have some of those in America, like in Arizona. And I think they even said they had some of those back east too, which is really interesting that that long ago, like it seems that they all really interacted from North America and this to Mexico, which is really South America, I guess. That they would all play a similar type sport or have actual courts set up. I'm wondering if this is one of those places where they found that sort of thing where I forget what they call it, but it's like a rubber ball and they put it through that hole. And usually the basket or the whole thing you're putting it through is like 25 feet off the ground. So that used to lead a lot of people thinking like, well, how tall were they or how did they get it in the hole? I'm not really sure, but I did see some recent articles related to some different places that have that type of ball court.
The one, the federally recognized person that's on over the mounds, basically that protect and preserve the mounds, and probably some of the state recognized Shawnee also that's separate, state and federal tribes. They got this big feeling, but they're all cousins. They're all related, and you talked about that too previously. But just to stay on focus, they were this mound basically. You could see throughout the year a lot of the lunar eclipse and all kind of different things. You could see it great from right there at that spot, basically. And so
So a
it
lot of
is.
the celestial stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the celestial lights are there. A lot of ceremonies will, a lot of activity basically. So if I guess if there was like one of those ghost things, the spirit monitors would be able to pick up energy and different things go on. And there are, well, in this part of the world, they play a lot of stickball. There's two types. There's the little brother of war, which is deals with two sticks, and then there's lacrosse from the Haudenosaunee and the Iroquois. So one of those two games were more played in this part of the world. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but I try to send you something to show you exactly what it kind of looks like. Did you get that in your email? Did you?
No, I don't think I did. But that's part of the thing with sites like this that you're talking about. It's amazing how much they have not just buried physically, but buried socially in America. That they actually had these sports, basically like sports arenas or sports fields. It's just like we would
Mhm.
take chase the ballpark downtown Phoenix, and can you imagine like 1,000 years from now they just bury it and say, yeah, those people never existed,
Right, right.
kind of
That's
thing.
where it goes. I mean, people just kind of just abandoned stuff. I mean, they just now finding King Sennacherib, and remember King Hezekiah. They just now
Mhm.
finding that king, and so it's proven that that situation where Hezekiah threw down the letter that King Sennacherib put down and said, "I'm coming for your city," and that one angel took 185 people out. That story really existed according to archaeologists. So people have probably doubted the whole Bible, but more and more archaeological things. Now, bringing it back to the Americas, I can see the same thing in Indianapolis. There's a whole bunch of football fields and stuff. What I realized, if they don't apply it every day, it has relevance to how's that going to help me fly my car. That was in 2020. We in 2020. You know what I'm saying? 2020, like 2420. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people think. In the past, what's the relevance of today? What can I learn from it? What can I gain? How can this help me boost my ship to go to the next place? Because people, they don't like looking in the past. A lot of people look to the future. A lot of Africans
Yeah.
I've talked to look to the future, not to the past. So yeah, I could see that a lot. They're just saying whatever.
And
And-
and if we don't learn from our mistakes of the past, how are we gonna, not have them
right.
happen again in the future? But it's like they had the whole society, like you're talking about there in Ohio. They have, a sports arena, more or less, a cemetery, public buildings, probably houses, whatever type of house they were using. And it was so sophisticated that it was so easy for somehow for the Americans that were in charge to say like, oh yeah, well, none of this stuff ever happened, none of it existed. You know, kind of like, oh no, we came to the new country and nobody was here.
Right. And that's what they were saying, that like in Indiana, in between Illinois to Indiana, these mounds actually exist all the way to Canada and even down south, but people just build right over them because a lot of times they just big hills. And if nobody talks about them, and if the tribe is gone and the tribe's not fighting for that land, then people just keep it moving until one day somebody discovers, oh, what's this? Oh, in the cornfield, oh, an arrowhead. Then they keep digging. Then they find certain things that were graves. And then that's what's going to lead into the next topic that I'm going to talk about, is things that's Repatriate Act and Native American graves. I'm going to just bring this out. There was the Ohata, which is a special ceremony doll from the Lenape, or it's also known as the Delaware, that there are actually 8 exhibits in the United States, and they was closed down because they were taking stuff out of native graves a lot. They took whatever they could and they sold it to all these different museums, and it was big money. Even to this day, I still think on the black market and places throughout the United States, maybe the world, Native American indigenous art is still very lucrative and selling. Could you imagine somebody's grandmother or somebody's great grandfather's body, bones, sacred pipes, sacred air, everything part
Mhm.
of that was sacred to indigenous people sitting in a museum and people making money off of that. That's
Yeah, and
disrespect.
there's a lot of that. That's there was one case we talked about in the class I just had where they had the even not even as far back they had the hair from the kids that they would cut their hair off when they went to the Indian schools, and they would cut their hair off, and then they kept it, and then some guy kept it, and then eventually some museums like, hey, we want to buy that, and they still have not returned a lot of that hair to the tribes, or not even to the tribes, much less how are they going to find the guy? Maybe he's 90 years old, I don't know, 80, 70, uh, or the girl, or maybe the person's dead. It's like they're still trying to get them to return the hair in that particular case. I don't remember the name of it, but uh, just just at least return it to the tribes. And it was actually hair cut off while the person was alive. It wasn't even a burial
Hmm.
thing. This
Was
is
this at the
kind of,
boarding schools? Was this at
yeah,
one of
through
the
the
boarding schools?
part of the boarding school stuff. Yeah, and
Ooh,
it's
that
just
gets it's sad. Did your grandparents go through the boarding schools, or were y'all saved because y'all were in the diff? Because the Yaquis, I want to explain to everybody, got their reservation in 1970 versus a lot of other tribes got it towards the close of the Indian Wars in Arizona. A lot
yeah.
like the Apaches were the last. But with your tribe, I know it's more of 1970. So you guys, did y'all still go through that or not really?
1978 is when they filed for the federal recognition, but they got a reservation land from the Papago Indians, which is, the Papago Indians said, hey, look, we're a sister tribe. We're going to give you so much of our reservation to have the Yaqui reservation in Tucson. But my grandparents didn't, but my first cousin, which Carlos, uh,
Mm-hmm.
he told me when his dad, which is my uncle, my dad's oldest brother, um, but like I think he's about 20 years older than my dad. Uh, so, but when he came back from World War II, my uncle Carmen, and he wanted to get married, and he was marrying his wife, who was part Apache from um, over there by North Scottsdale. What do they call it? The Fort Apache, not Fort Apache, Fort McDowell Indian Reservation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
My
well,
grandfather took me there before. I've been there.
okay, so Carmen's wife's great grandmother was from there, and she was Apache. So the woman Carmen married my aunt. They weren't allowed to get married in Tempe because they told them you cannot marry an Native American within Tempe courts or whatever. And I'm not sure if they tried the county or not. I think what Carlos did tell me that they had to go outside of the county to get married. So that was after my uncle actually had returned from World War II. And in World War II, he'd been over there. He was actually in Jerusalem during the war. But so he comes back from World War II. It's like you can't marry her within city of Tempe or Maricopa County. You have to go outside the county to marry your wife because she's 1/4 Apache or maybe even less. I'm not sure exactly how much.
And that's sad because the Apache, the Inde, and the Ne, and many other native nations, Lakota, Arapahoes, you know what I'm saying? Cheyenne used their tribal language to fight for this country and secure it and give them messages that were needed on the battlefield. And yet, look, you can't do this, you can't do that. You know what? And I think a lot of them probably stood up and said, look, I'm a veteran. I saved you. I know the Navajos, they probably said, look, I saved you. You owe me. No, they probably didn't, but some did. I know there were black veterans that was like, look, I'm not giving up my seat. I'm not giving up my seat on this bus, and they were killed. So before Rosa Parks, there were a lot of black veterans, I'm sure Native veterans that stood up and said, hey, I'm
Oh,
for this country.
yes.
I'm not into the back.
I know with with my grandfather. Let me just say what he told me. Okay, so he was born in Tempe, Arizona, and he said when they were kids, they would go on the other side of a mountain, which was used to be Tempe Butte, Hayden Butte. It's a mountain to us who went to Arizona State University, the time I went. But so they would go on the other side over there, the east side, and there was an area that got filled up with water, and people would use that for the swimming pool. And
Hmm.
then if you he said, but they even before that they would cross the river when it was flowing. They'd swim across, and right across on Rural Road, there's a bridge there now. If you cross the bridge on Rural Road, I know you're somewhat have been in Phoenix Metropolitan, so you probably know the areas. So you
Right.
cross the bridge, and when I was a kid, it was like there were some stables there and pet cemetery on Rural Road. Well, my grandfather said when they were kids, they would go there every day, and there was a Apache tribe that lived right there by Rural Road and the river bottom on the north side, and they would play with them, wrestle with them, eventually get in a fight every day, call each other names, and then they would go back home, and then they'd come the next day and do the same thing. But
Mm.
he said it was Apache. And it was Apache tribe people, and they had a little settlement right there. This would have been like 1895, 1896.
Hmm.
So a lot of stuff like that's forgotten. From what he told me too is if you went down from First Street from where Monte's La Casa Vieja was and where Carl Hayden had the house, you go down First Street uh, to the west, and you get to the railroad tracks. Before the railroad tracks were there on First Street, what you had was you had a tribe there, which was basically Salt River Pima or Maricopa that
My
spoke.
ex-girlfriend, one of my ex-girlfriends over the internet. I met her in person, then eventually we had to do the phone thing. She was half Pima, half Maricopa, and she used to get a check.
Well, here's the thing: the Salt. What that's what I'm talking about is like, okay, so that area there would be Salt River. They were
Okay.
living right there on the Salt River, but from what I understand is they spoke the Peeposh, which would be the Maricopa language. So back then, I don't think it mattered so much, but there was a tribal settlement there on First Street, west of Mill Avenue. You go down to where the railroad tracks is now. They put the railroad tracks in, I think, in 1856. They put it straight through where the tribe's settlement was.
Hmm.
And then once the railroad tracks come through, they own so much land on each side of the tracks, and that obviously would be intentional. So a lot of this history got buried, and there was a big thing even a few years ago. The city finally took some land from some people who had squatted on it later, which before them it had belonged to like the Cahill Construction Company. Before that, it belonged to um, I believe the Gonzaleses. Before that, it belonged to Rafael Martinez. Before that, I or no, I think Rafael Martinez got it after. Um, well, he got it when the natives were still living there. Then they put the railroad through. So it's like
Gotcha.
1850s, 1856. Then after the railroad went through, he sold it to the Gonzaleses, and the
Hmm.
Gonzaleses married in with the Cahills, and that's why
Hmm.
it ended up being Cahill Construction Company. So when Cahills owned it, city didn't care because it's the Cahills. But those
Right.
Cahills are also half Gonzales, so
Got.
eventually they abandoned it, I think, and then some other people from Tempe came in and they just squatted there, and they had it for years and years and years, all the time when I grew up and everything. And then they only took it away from them, I think, about 5 or 10 years ago, City of Tempe, and they said that they couldn't perfect the title. It's like, well,
Oh.
you know, they were
Right.
they were squatting, but it's like there are people from the Cahill Gonzalez family still alive, and it's like they probably you know wouldn't be able to perfect the title either because the railroad tracks came through. But the thing was with this Rafael Martinez, I think was the first one who owned it. That was
Hmm.
in the 1850s. We're talking Spanish land grant,
Okay.
and it's like it just basically he's like, okay, they're ripping me off. They're putting it's like here's the tribe. So then Rafael Martinez comes, a Spaniard or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I own this land according to Spain. I also own these natives because when you got a hacienda or what I call economienda, the economy more or less, but you not only own the land, you own the indigenous people on it. You own the Indios. That's the way
Really?
the Spanish land grants worked. And
Let me
if
ask you this. Was it because they say in the name of God we trust, if these people are not Christians, we could enslave them, take their land and make them and do whatever we want because they
well,
were
that
not.
was later. That was later after the Pope
Mhm,
intervened and told the U.S. government, like you can't just steal their land; you have to give them their land. But
mhm.
that was more like I think it was late 1700s then.
Doctrines of
Um,
Discovery, the 1700, the Doctrine of Discovery. That's
yeah, so in the West, it was like they're not really getting too much news from back east. At the
right.
1776 and after that. I mean, I'm sure there was some communication, but it wasn't like, "Hey, you can't take these Indians' land here."
God,
Maybe back since it was a current fight till 1830 when they decide like we're going to plan this out, we're going to do these reservations, we're going to checkerboard reservations, and McKinley. Before that, Thomas Jefferson was involved in all this too. He gave a lot of good speeches on how he was, pro Native American and pro Indigenous, but that's not how it was going behind the scenes or in some of his other writings, which I think they discovered some letters he wrote to the Native Americans, which are not the same as the letters he wrote to other politicians during his time.
got you, got
So
you.
that's why, like, it really took off in the 1830s. And like I said, so I guess if you think about it, the trains, railroad tracks, by 1850s, they're getting out this way, and it's like, okay, you got a tribe right here. Let's just take the track right through there.
Now,
And then the Spanish.
when they were making these railroad tracks, because you got to dig, did they recover a lot of indigenous like dolls or burial or even skeletons? Did they find anything, or was it later
Well,
that they something recently?
well, remember the tracks were going in 1856. The
Mm-hmm.
city, or actually, it wasn't City of Tempe, but it's called Tempe Town. It started in 1871.
Okay.
So before that, there was like there was a way station which the stagecoach would go through over by A Mountain, kind of by the close to where my great grandparents lived to the entrance to the stadium. There was a way station on the and somebody lived there. And I do have a couple of people that in the City of Tempe records for Mexico, Arizona, .com, I think it is, but it no longer exists. It was powered through Tempe Historical Society, Tempe History Museum.
Hmm.
Scott Schaefer did the research there, and but a couple of the papers I found about there was a which I'm assuming is probably someone related to me, like an F.M. Estrada, born in Tempe in 1804. Now remember, Tempe didn't exist till 1871. So that sort of thing, I found it with some other people too and other names, where people were born in 1802 in Tempe, but there was no Tempe. And these aren't people who were born in Mexico. These were people who were born in right here in Nueva España, but where Tempe, Arizona eventually did become Tempe Town and later City of Tempe or after it was a town. So I don't think they found anything on those railroads because they weren't looking. They probably didn't care. The main thing was like they wanted to put it where they wanted to put it, the easiest path, but also if it takes out the Indian tribe, that's a benefit to them.
Right, because if no indigenous people could claim the land or come back and say my people are on this, then they could win. So, do you guys got a program? Because I know about land return or land back, and if an indigenous person buys that piece of land, it's indigenous owned. Do you guys has that program hit Arizona yet?
I'm not
Outside of
sure.
the reservations, land back. That's what it's called. You could buy
Uh,
traditional tribal territory back. for the tribe? I saw, have any native people did that, or is it too expensive and native people are not generating enough income to
Uh,
even think about that? Because I
I
know
think I've heard it
Arizona is
mentioned
fishy.
before, but no. I mean, I was interested in doing something like that because, like I said, with the Gonzaleses that lived there, that's on my grandmother's side, and they were obviously mixed. I mean,
Hmm.
they're buried in the Yaqui Cemetery, but that was part of the problem in Tempe. They kept um, pushing. The city would complain, or the town, originally the town, and say like, move them out further. So
Mm.
they took them from that location where they put the railroad track through and west of it. They lived there till like about 1900 or something, and then the city said, "Get them out of here. We don't want them so close to us," because you had like Mill Avenue. I think was actually Mill Avenue back then. East was the Mexican side. Mill Avenue
Mhm.
west to Ash was the wide area, and then west of Ash is where you had the Yaquis living. So
Got you.
my great grandfather took them and put them up on about Priest and 13th Street to McKinney Road, and basically in that area where there's Daly Park and stuff like that. The land there was owned by my great grandfather, so first he took and put them there,
Hmm.
and then they started bringing more people from more Yaquis from Mexico because they were getting killed over there and enslaved.
Hmm.
So not just him, but a lot of people from Tempe would get wagons and go get the people. Like I think I said before, like some were relatives, some were family friends, and they knew where to go and get the people. And these were Yaqui people who, if they stayed, they either got enslaved or killed. So
Got
um,
you.
they bring
So
them to Tempe, and then the city complained again when they were out there on Priest and 13th Street, and between Priest and McKinney, and between 13th Street and Broadway, what it is now. So then my great grandfather took them out to what is it, the south side of the San Francisco Canal off of Mill, and uh, between Priest and Mill. And that was the first church, and that's where the cemetery is now. But there was a church there originally.
got you.
Then the city complained again. They want to move again. So they moved them to the Cuarenta, which was owned by Mrs. Higgins. It was like 40 acres that she rented out. I believe she rented it out uh, to my great grandfather, like for shared property type stuff or whatever. So they put them there.
Mm.
And then the city complained again. They want to move again. And they said, no, we're not going any further. And so my grandfather, he did the deed for the church and La Cuarenta and that. Um, by that time, his dad was much older, so he was doing everything. But then he did everything with Maricopa County. He went to court and fought for them to keep their land. Um, he had the deed and all the records. Unfortunately, by the time he passed away, it's like there was nothing left of the records and all that. The tribe did come to me once and asked me, like, "Where's the deed?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I think we threw all that stuff away." It's like,
I got so Yaqui, like, okay, even to this day, the most warriors tribe that I know that causes some uproar. You mess with Mohawks from United States, from northern what is that, like northern New York or
New York.
Canada? Yeah, Canada too, because there's a place called Ganawagi or Kanawagi that's on in
Yeah.
Montreal. Those natives will go hard. What do you think it's going to take for these natives to go hard outside of a pipeline, for them to go that hard where they stop a whole train? They set it up where you're not doing that? Or do you think the natives in the United States has lost their physical will to fight, and it's more court? Have they changed more to the court orders versus just standing up? Or they do fight, but it doesn't help, it makes it worse?
That's
Is
the
that
problem. Okay, originally it was the physical fight. Then it was okay. We need to learn how to read more, get the paperwork, do the treaties. But then everyone doing the treaties was usually somebody who was like part or like married in with a Native American. Uh, and then you get to the point where it's like, okay, everybody needs to go to school, go to law school, stuff like this, and then they fought it that way, and then pretty soon it's like, well, that's nice and everything, but we're going to ignore your stuff you're doing legally. And then there's some things now, like that you're seeing legally, they're getting some gains, or like the governor here, and Governor Hobbs, like she did a few things recently. I know that was helping some of the native tribes here in Arizona, and I believe one helping the Navajo. And so you see a little bit of reversal, but just to me personally, I still see it as, for the most part, if the government really doesn't want to act, the U.S. government, it's like they don't care. Look what Trump did down there to the to Honolulu,
Yeah, he
in
blew
southern
up
Arizona.
the area to make that border wall. But I'm like, this is my mindset. History has taught us from the Bible two times, from the Romans, the Babylonians and the Romans. You build a wall, they're gonna destroy it. They're gonna go over it. We look the Mongolians knocked the wall, came to China still. And what do the Mexicanos do? They either take a ladder, go, or they dig under. So that wall's useless.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying though is like the mentality of
Hmm.
that administration. Uh,
Hmm.
it's not just the fact that they blew it up and stuff. Do you remember there were some protesters, and basically, I don't know, it was FBI or Border Patrol or whatever. They just basically went up and you know, just physically took them, arrested them, and moved them. And
Yeah,
I was thinking,
I think a lot of times for people to respect you nowadays, you have to do something big enough to get their attention. You have to scare them in order to get their attention, because if you're nice and play nicely, they know it. It's almost like you got to put the fear of them for them to respect you, to back off. Like, I don't know,
yeah,
like some of the most notorious tribes now, they're they are laughing stocks to them, and it's almost like until they really get tired of being nice, they really tell them, hey, we got to do something more. The United States is going to do it. And we got to realize something. The United States isn't playing fair on this game. Okay. The same thing in the black community. They put us 5 steps back. They gave us education, but it wasn't the right type of education to survive in this world. Then they say, okay, you're educated, but you still can't get this job. And then you move 5 steps back. So every time they give us something, we move forward. They think of something 5 more to keep us back, no matter what we do. No matter what we say, they always push back. And it's almost to the point where you have to come to the United States government and say, look, it's time to go. It's time to go. Because
yeah,
they keep
because
pushing and they
I
want it
think
all.
they planned it out. I think a lot of it is they've already planned it out ahead of time for you. Like, we're going to give you this, you're going to think you have it, you're going to move forward, and then you're going to fall on your face. Like
Right.
with even when they hit the thing with slavery, it's like, okay, you're free. Yeah, where can I go get a job? Where can I go rent a house? Where can I
Right.
go eat dinner? Well, nowhere in our town.
Get
So
out.
where are you going to go? And how much money is the guy giving me that I'm working for? It's
Mhm.
like, see you later. You're free now. It's
Right.
so that was a big scam too.
Right. Like the sad thing was that our own indigenous brothers enslaved us, which I understand. Spoils of war, it happens. But when it's an institute set up by the United States government, by the Mexican government, and you guys make a benefit and you guys don't go back and pay the people, make it a way for them to get better and be equal parts in your government, for it to work, and they want to make it better for themselves, but they introduce drugs and violence and stuff. It's almost like you really trying to kill them off. You've got a major plan on a spiritual level, getting rid of everybody who's not like you. At the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to, because you're not like them, you're not part of their circle. They really don't care who you are regardless. And I think that's the reality that I think most tribes realize. They really don't care about us. They're not like us, as Kendrick Lamar says. They're
That's
really
right.
not like us.
That's what I mean. The mentality is just like they. it's so they're so indifferent. It's like it's just what do you call it? We're just in the way, It's like please move
Right.
aside. Let me take everything you have, you know,
Hmm.
and enjoy it. I was gonna say too,
Right.
like, uh, remember too I think it was the Choctaw, maybe the Chickasaw also. Remember
Hmm.
they had black slaves, and they
Oh,
had
I
them.
could tell you a story about that. In fact, my great grandmother was supposed to have been a full blood Mississippi Choctaw. My grandfather was black and wanted to intermarry with the family, but the family was like, no, you cannot marry. If you do, we're going to disown you. So she was disowned because she married my grandfather. And she was cut off from the family. Only one of her brothers took her in. While my grandfather was working, she was raped and she killed herself. And so my uncle, my great uncle, took my grandmother in, was raising her traditionally. Then the family, the black side came and took my grandmother away from the family. So we lost our connection to the Mitchells from the Choctaw people. Tried to, I contacted Mississippi Choctaw. They have no record of her, but my cousin recently found her in Oklahoma, but I don't think that story's right because of the things. But I could be wrong because there was Mississippi Choctaws enrolled in Oklahoma, but they weren't living in Mississippi. So it could be one of those situations. But yeah,
Was the
Choctaws.
so
Go ahead.
were they when that happened? Were they still in Mississippi or were they already in Oklahoma?
Both. There
Both.
are Mississippi Choctaws that are considered Mississippi Choctaws that came over from Oklahoma. So what happened was under the Dancing Rabbit Treaty, it made a provision for the more traditional Choctaws. That's what they call them in their language, Choctaw. Choctaws are the ones that want to stay on the land could and get citizenship from the state of Mississippi and Alabama. They could stay. The ones who wanted to relocate could relocate. And so now there's actually three. There's one in Louisiana, one in Oklahoma, and one in Mississippi. And then there's a subgroup that moved further up to Tennessee. So yeah.
So did
So
any of
go
them
ahead.
end up on the Dawes roll? The Dawes
Yeah, the
roll?
DOS rolls. That's what I'm talking about. The DOS rolls. That's what happened.
Yeah.
All of them are part of the DOS rolls, but there's two different like split
Uh,
of
so you're
the
talking.
things. There, there's the
Uh,
Oklahoma DOS rolls for the Oklahoma Choctaw. Okay, so it's Mississippi Choctaw and the Oklahoma Choctaw Nation. They the same people because they all come from Mississippi, but they divided. So
yeah, and
it
the problem too is, remember they assigned those names. Like they had
right.
10 names, and it was like, the first guy,
Oh,
it's like, you're Richard Dawson. The next guy, it's like you're Charles Bowman or whatever. It was all like standard anglicized names, and you got assigned a name. Uh, so that didn't help. It's like we're putting you guys in a role, but it's not really the name that is your name, so you won't
mhm,
know. And it's like your descendants probably won't know. I mean, if they know that you're Mourning Dove or
mhm,
or something,
right,
it's like they're not gonna know that you became, you know, Sarah, Davidson or whatever. You know,
right.
yeah, I
Now,
think that was a lot of confusion done on purpose too.
now I can say this: the Choctaw, the Cherokee, the Creeks and the Seminole all adopt their former slave because that was the agreement of 1866. People don't know this, but 1866 slavery existed in Oklahoma to 1866 for those black slash native people that are called freemen nowadays that people don't really take that history. So when they talk about the end of slavery in Galveston, Texas, that wasn't the end of slavery as we know it for Black Americans or Black indigenous Americans. It wasn't the end. It was just it went all the way to 1866. And then some people continued on all the way into Martin Luther King times. So slavery still wasn't over. And there's still slavery that still goes on, but as far as institutional slavery, after the 1866, it was finally over, documented. But
Yeah,
like I
I
said,
guess it makes sense because if you're, pure African, it's like, okay, you get freed. If you're half Indian or half Native, half Indigenous plus half African, it's like, yeah, did they,
well,
like you said, they didn't let them go.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
part of the treaty for them to come back into the union, and part of them so they wouldn't be enemies no more, because a lot of the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, the Creek, the majority of them in the Chickasaw all fought on the Confederate side, but there were fractions of the tribe that fought for the United States. So that's why they didn't lose at all. But the majority were Confederates in Oklahoma and Texas too. And so part of the thing for them to come back in was say, you're gonna all the slaves, they're going to be citizens. So in between the time they did it all the way to currently, there are only three federally recognized tribes that have adopted their slaves back. Their former, well, black indigenous, I'm going to say their former people. The Cherokee Nation gave 100% back to them, thanks to Chief. Well, no, it was Chief Baker that agreed to it in 2017. Chief, the current chief, Chief Hossett, said he made them 100% part of the community because he wanted to right the wrongs. And he actually did a Cherokee Freeman institution, like a whole thing about their history and things like that, which I thought it was great. The Seminoles, they finally gave them health care, so now they get tribal citizenship and health care, but they don't get the rest of the benefits, the annual money. So that's the next part that they're fighting for. The Creeks in the legal league have the right to enroll versus their chief is still fighting. Now, the two tribes that still left that haven't gave their things under consideration is the Choctaw and Chickasaw. And the Chickasaw never adopted their citizens. They never. So technically, if the Choctaw Freeman, I mean, both of those push it all the way and be like, cut their federally money off because they're not going by that treaty of 1866. It can happen. It's like they did to the Cherokee Nation. They cut that money off. It was like, hold up. They got it together. They wanted to set the thing right. But it's a big fight, and a lot of black indigenous people like, why should I be part of this nation if they're going to treat me like that? I said, first of all, this is a legacy in the history. You got to understand this is a money game. Just because not everybody's going to treat you like that. You come in, you learn the language, you come in, learn the customs, they're going to treat you, and you got your paperwork, and they say, this is all who my family is. It's more accepting. But if they don't, then find somebody who does. Not everybody in the tribes is not going to like you, and maybe just some people. That's just like, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you know, like, I mean, what about people who were actually still like 100% African and never mixed with anybody in the tribe, but maybe they went with them all the way from, Virginia or Mississippi or Alabama to Oklahoma, like, especially with, because I know this was an issue for the Chickasaw and Choctaw. So did they take people who were mixed and
both? See, this is what happens. People don't. What happens is the slave master, in between white slave masters, they sleep with their slaves, so their bloodline is what you call it. But what the United States said was, regardless if they were not, it wasn't even based off of blood, because a long time ago, you got to understand, people intermarried and got citizenship, right? And there was no, if a white person wanted to marry into the tribe, they could. But somebody that black, they try to make these laws just like the United States government, if that makes sense. They had cattle slavery to the point where they had these same slave laws to control them and stuff like that. Yeah, there were a lot of people who are completely, they claim just African. John Cheeto, they trace his lineage. He looks highly, what I'm saying, highly African, and but his family's from the Chickasaw Nation, and he don't have citizenship in the Chickasaw Nation because he's Chickasaw Freeman. So yeah, so they didn't adopt them in, so the fight is still going on because they signed up.
So basically, if they don't adopt them, they're called a freeman.
No. All of the slaves that were set free by the five civilized tribes are called freemen. Everybody's really freemen, basically, in the South. That was the term that they used for free slaves, was freemen. Everybody's freemen. But they put the Cherokee freeman, Choctaw freeman, Chickasaw freeman. That's a title for a certain period of time. The Cherokee Nation wants to get rid of it and just say you're a Cherokee citizen now. But the Freemans, especially my friend, I'm gonna bring him on. He could explain a little bit better. He says no. At this point in time, we want that so we know how we were looked at. This is where we come from, and this is, this is who we are. You know what I'm saying? This. We were a separate class. They said we didn't have no indigenous blood, but we actually did because there was like a lot of intermarriage, a lot in between the blacks and the natives, and not just the five civilized tribes. There was also Lenape, Delaware, Shawnee. There's so much this mixture because people lived there over a quarter time. But to answer your question, yes, there are probably some people who are just black, but it's hard to say because they've been with them since slavery began. They might have like maybe a quarter,
Uh,
maybe 1/25, but they do have it, but it may not be
or they could
that
be
much.
a mix of what you're saying, a mix of white and African, and then also have mixed in with someone from the tribe. But the
Right.
tribe is still like, no, forget it. You're only a third or you're a quarter. Forget it.
What?
Is that
Well,
how they kind
see,
of do it?
they can't really they eliminated that because most Cherokee people don't have enough blood quantum to meet the federal standard nowadays, and they know that, so that's why they got rid of that. In Oklahoma, well, East Oklahoma, the five civilized tribes say you have lineage. Well, just as long as you can prove one ancestor on the DOS rolls, we're gonna keep it moving. But the problem is that a lot of times the Freemen don't have one ancestor by blood. That's another issue. They changed up the game and said, well, you could only be enrolled with the tribe if you could find a tribal member by blood. Even though they were documented and lived in the nation and were nation citizens after Civil War, they changed the game. Now the Cherokee Nation changed it back to make it about if your ancestors were Cherokee Freemen, they were citizens, you get it back. After 150 years, they changed it for the
Yeah.
better.
I know the
So,
Chickasaw went to 1/1,000,000, and
right,
that's just in general. But I don't think that was to help the African descendants necessarily.
right,
I'm not
right.
sure why they did it.
Well, to
And
me, I think because, like I said, blood quantum in those nations is so low because they intermix. And to be Cherokee or it's adoption. See, if people don't realize there were a lot of blacks and whites that were adopted in. And like when I break it down, also like you could be Cherokee because you were a good person. You did something for the tribe. Even my friend from his I won't say his name, he's from the Eastern Man. I met him in person. He said that if you do something good and then the tribe needs to be done, they could adopt you in as a member. So then there's a lot of white folks that were adopted in that have no blood but married in at that particular time. And now there are people on those rolls that are Cherokee by blood, even though they have no Cherokee by blood. The same thing could have been for black folks. They came in at a certain period of time and they're citizens. So that's what it is. You know what I'm saying? But there's
I know what
actually
kind of similar, but not that it really involves rights and stuff. But they used to have the what do you call them? The orphan trains or whatever that used to come, especially to Arizona. And they come to the mining towns and stuff. And a lot of the kids would be Jewish or Italian, and they'd be brought from New York. And with a lot of the Italian ones, I noticed and this happened in Tempe too. Like the kids were orphans, so it's like people would adopt them. Mexicans family would adopt the kid and just give it their Mexican name. And a lot of times the kids were Italians that pretty much by looks kind of like didn't make much difference. So it's not a matter of being in a tribe and stuff, but it was kind of interesting when I found out about a lot of that because there's people I know and worked with and stuff, and it's like and they have a Spanish last name. It's like and then they're like, no, I'm not Mexican. It's like, well, you're this certain family or whatever, and it's like,
gotcha.
oh, well, yeah, but my great grandmother was brought on the orphan train or whatever, and she was adopted by this Mexican family in Tempe, and it's like, so you would think just by looks and sometimes even speak Spanish fluently, and and you grow
Right.
up with them, and it's like, no, I'm not Mexican at all. I'm like, mostly Italian and Caucasian or whatever.
right?
That was an interesting thing I found in Tempe, and I heard that well, I talked to one woman who did a lot of genealogy stuff, and she's like, "Oh, it's really big. They dropped a lot of these kids in the mining towns."
Mm,
Yeah.
got you. Now,
But
what
a
they
lot of
would
times
go ahead,
it
my
was
bad.
The Mexican families that would take them in more so than the Anglo, because the Anglos were like, "Well, we can't afford it," blah 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 blah. Where the Mexicans would be like, "Oh, what's the matter? We take another kid. We already got 9 or whatever." And that was seriously, from what she said, that's the way it worked. You know, it's like they
Hmm.
didn't care if there was another mouth to feed or another.
Hmm. Um, what I was going to add to it, that part of the Cherokee ideology, and maybe like an Apache, in order to be a real Cherokee before they changed the law, because they're very people, they're called Ani Waya or Ani Onwuyu, which means the principal people. One of their laws said you have to have a Cherokee mother and mother's mother, right? So your great grandmother, your mother, and your mother have to be Cherokee in order to be real Cherokee. But the problem was when Cherokee men started marrying white women in particular, the children would be cut off. So they had to change that because they didn't have a clan. And it's very important to have a clan in the Cherokee ceremonial type of lifestyle. But when they adopt Christianity, they had to figure out how can we do this. So the number one clan that a lot of new people come from is called Long Hair Clan. They actually have 7 clans. There's the Wolf, there's the wild potato, there's the bird, there's blue, there's a deer clan. They already said long hair clan. One more, I forgot the last one, bird clan. So of those ones, the people who didn't have a clan was usually adopted into the long hair clan. But without having that clan system, then kind of like they started losing like, track of family members, basically who's who, because in the Cherokee way, you're Cherokee by your mother, and your mother's people are your people. So that's another
Oh,
reason how they look at outsiders is, well, you don't have a clan. Who are you? Where do you come from? Are you my mother's people or not? Because even though your father, you come from your mother and your father's job is to raise his sister's kids, but he would hunt for the family, but he would raise his sister's kids. And then your mother's uncle would raise you. So I'm thinking that played in a factor too of that traditional mentality. But as time
yeah.
changed, it changed. But but there are a lot of Black Cherokees that do exist that do have that grandmother. It was just not. It was just under Freeman and not under Cherokee by blood. But it's all been changed. I'm glad for them. And like one day when Alfonso has time, he'll come on here. He's a full member of the Cherokee Nation, and he's actually Mississippi Choctaw, Creek by blood, and Lenape. He's not even Cherokee. The Cherokees adopted the Lenape in so they could get more money. And Mississippi Choctaws, they the biggest nation, the second largest nation outside of the Dene. At first it was the Cherokees, but now the Navajo population then blew during COVID. So yeah, they the largest native nation
I
outside.
want to ask too.
Go ahead.
Um, is it the Northwestern Band of Cherokee, the one? Uh, I'm not sure they're in Oklahoma, but they're the one. Uh, a lot of people I know are trying to get into. I think they have where if you're 1/8 or whatever, you can join.
You talking
But I
about the
think
one in
it's
North Carolina or the one in Oklahoma? There's two. There's the Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma, and then you got the United Katuah, which is the more traditional. I
well,
think.
I think they call it Northeast Band or Northwest Band. I don't remember which.
What
Um,
state are they located? Are they in North Carolina? Because North Carolina, I think the cutoff is the eighth. I think yeah. So it would be
yeah.
that one. Now, in order for them to enroll in that, it's called the Baker Rolls. Now, what happened? Why they don't have the problem is because they let all their slaves. They kind of were like the other Virginians and the other Kentuckys and all them other. They let them go. So this is what they say, and this is why they were against the. Are you familiar with the Lumbee?
A little bit. But
Okay, they were saying that a lot of Lumbee were actually Cherokees at one point in time, or they were descendants of the slaves that they used to own. So they was like, nah, you guys, they fought hard to keep the Lumbee from getting federally recognition because a lot of their former slaves went down to Lumberton, North Carolina, and I guess, but there was a Lumbee tribe, and there still is. They're state recognized, but a lot of them intermixed with the Lumbee neighbors and then the whites too. So they considered them not a real nation because they don't have a tribal language no more. That's why they couldn't get federal
Okay.
recognition. One thing, and it was crazy because it wasn't even the North Carolina Cherokees that did it. It was somebody from Montana that did it. I'm like, hold up. But everything else was good, was cool. They had everything lined up, except and Donald Trump supported them. But I guess Donald Trump didn't really 100% do it because if he's the president, he could have signed it. Well, maybe they stopped it with the president because I know in northern Indiana, the Poig and Potawatomi used Bill Clinton, and they got their federal recognition in 1994. So I guess Donald Trump really didn't push it that hard, or they went through a different process with the Department of Interior, which screwed them in the end because I guess they took a vote on it and the vote was no, and that knocked them down to get their federal status. But in a way, being state recognized, if you cool with the state don't control you as much as the feds do.
Oh
If
yeah,
that makes
because the
sense,
feds give more money.
right?
Well, maybe not necessarily percentage wise, but as far as amount, it's a lot more from the state. I mean, from the feds.
Right,
And it
state
was
recognized
interesting.
tribes have more freedom in a way. Like they're not pressed. Like they're doing good. They doing well. They move around. And then there's another level out east that we have. It's called international. Some nations choose to do that, where they're documented and they move around internationally. And I don't know
I
how
know.
that's.
I was gonna say, when you're talking about the Mohawks, see, like I know the
Mhm.
Mohawk and their history a little because my grandfather, my mom's dad, he said, uh, he goes like, for his family, uh, they're Mohawk,
Mhm.
and he's like, for my grandmother, his wife, they were Oneida.
Oneida.
Yeah, but on actually on my grandfather's side, they were also from his mom. They're uh, Foley's, and they go back to Pocahontas and all them. And I remember one of the records said the guy's name, whatever Foley, and his Indian woman,
Mhm.
and so that's in my genealogy. That's on
Mm.
my grandfather's mother's side. Then on my grandfather's father's side, they go back to Mohawk. And I found a couple of the guys back in the line that were actually interpreters
Mm.
for the treaties.
Got you.
And that's what I was saying earlier. It's like, why were they interpreting? Because they were married to native women. So they might have even, by the time they're interpreting, it might even be a kid that's half and half, I'm
Right.
assuming.
And you
Yeah.
know what? Intermarrying with tribes, you're a full tribal member. That's what people don't
Yeah.
forget to. That's why when some of these black aboriginals be like, "Oh, this is not a real person," I'm like, "How do you know this is not a real tribal member just because they look different? Just because they a different skin tone don't mean they didn't intermarry. They wasn't adopted in. You don't understand adoption is a real thing that still exists to this very day, even among these regular families. If we like you, you're part of us, regardless if you're born in through the blood or if you were adopted in. And I think that a lot of people have to understand this. There's different ways to be part of any community. If you do right, you rock with them, you sell, you trade, you're part of us regardless. Just like after my daughter was born among the Mi'kmaq, and they teased me and said, "Oh, you're a Blackfoot," and I was like, "Yeah, whatever," you know. But then as time went on, I realized, no, we're Mississippi Choctaw, not Blackfoot. It was like a lot. Well, I kind of researched it too and realized, no, that's not unless we have somebody from the Lakotas that was on the plains, which we don't on my dad's mother's side, no. Then we don't, but at the time I thought we did. So it was like, oh, after my daughter was born, it was like, oh, you're Mi'kmaq. I was like, I thank you, but I'm cool. But he was showing he accepted me, but me, I'm proud because my mom's side, we got Yaqui, we got Apache, and we got Cherokee blood. So it's like I already got my native nations running through me. I'm cool off you. I don't need that. But I should have said thank you, but being proud of where you come from and knowing who you are, you don't need acceptance if you know who you are. But I still rock with the Micmac up there. I'm still cool with the, you know.
And it's, I think with the only thing, like, and I said it before, I think first time we talked, is like the tribes, I think, need to recognize, like, they don't have to go with that 1/4 thing. They can change it. They can change their charter. They can change their constitution. They can make everybody 1/1,000,000. Do it through lineage blood, and it's like that way they're gonna last a lot longer and own the land a lot longer and benefit the people.
Right.
And it's like, and who cares if, like, what if there's uh, somebody has 10% here, 15 there, 25 in another. I mean, we should be able to claim all of it. It's not like, if it's kind of like if you see somebody, it's like, oh, I'm half Irish and half Spanish, right? You don't sit there and say, like, well, you're not really Spanish because you're Irish now, so you stick with Irish.
You be like,
Like the
oh,
Northern.
okay.
Yeah,
Right.
that's how. Yeah, you don't go up to Donald Trump and say, well, Donald, some of your family here looks like they're Jewish, and the people in
Yeah, you gotta be careful what you say, kind of like with that word right there, because then when we
yeah,
become monetized, we gotta be careful. Can't use that word.
yeah. I'm not picking on
It's a
anybody. I just checked this genie the other day. I think 2 days ago for Donald, and he used to be my 17th cousin. Now he's my 25th cousin.
Oh,
So
I got you.
if
So it's
you
getting
look at
further
this,
and further away.
yeah, I think he's paying because it went from 70% to nothing, then it's back to 25%
You
now.
know what? I found out about Donald from my bro from Oklahoma, um, who's enrolled with the Cherokee Nation. He actually said Donald Trump is indigenous. He got some indigenous blood. And I was like, yes, but he don't need it. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he don't need that because Donald Trump was like, I know what real Indians are. When he was talking about the tribe over there trying to make a casino, I think
Uh,
it was. I'm trying to think. I get back what tribe it was, and I posted up in the room and
you
put it
mean
on
in
your.
New York or something, New Jersey?
Yeah, it's trying to get it because he was trying to get some native land. There was already a casino. He was like, "Those are not real Indians. I know what real Indians look like. Those are not
Yeah.
real Indians." And I don't know what he was referring to. Like, I would have to see the Indians that he was referring to, that tribe in particular, to see if he had the right. But he was talking about it, and they have brought that back up in the Native American treaty topic. So I think I'm gonna do my research, and that's gonna be our next training topic about Donald Trump saying what real Native Indians look like, and how would he know, him being a native New Yorker, unless he had some experience with some Native people. But then again, with
Yeah,
him living in New York, I
I
think that
forget the exact word they use, but I don't remember what the word or the term is. But um, I went to the Yaqui office here in Guadalupe about 2 or 3 years, and I
hmm
went in and I checked with the woman and said, I have a 10 o'clock appointment with so and so. Hang on, I have to switch the air conditioner, but it's going to mess up the sound a little bit.
okay.
But so I'm sitting there waiting, and then this woman that's back there where the receptionists are, because it's really kind of walled off, and this is kind of around COVID time and stuff, and it's really hard to get in. It's not like the old office used to be. Old office used to be trailers. You walked in and out all the time. It's like, say hi to everybody. Well, this is kind of like you're going into a building with a lot of walls and a lot of doors, and you're not allowed to pass them unless somebody's with you. So I'm standing there in the lobby looking at pictures on the wall and stuff like this. And then all of a sudden, one of the workers calls security. And then some of the security guys come up. I don't remember if they're actual Yaqui police or Yaqui security for the tribal office here in Guadalupe. And the woman says, like, there's a crazy white guy out here in the lobby and he won't leave.
Mm.
So these two kids, kind of young security guys, come out and they're looking at me like, you're going to have to leave. Well, like, I have a 10 o'clock appointment with so-and-so. I've already checked on, and this is not the woman I checked in with. It's a different woman that came up and thought a white guy was in the lobby. And then I guess the older guy that's like their supervisor, he came out and he's like, "Where's the white guy?" And they're like, "Right here." He goes, "That's a Yaqui." And he's like, "You guys get back over there." And he's like, "Hey, you want a food box or something?" You start being
Right.
nice. He could tell by looking at me. But the other ones, the woman that was working in there, who's Yaqui, and those two younger Yaqui men that were security guards, they were believing the other woman, which is not the one I checked in with. The one I checked in with like went on break or something. But the one that came
Mhm.
on, she that's what she said. I told her like I can hear you. You call me a crazy white guy, and I have an appointment with so and so at 10 o'clock. I've already checked in. She still called security. I wasn't doing anything but looking at a
Oh,
picture on the wall there of I believe my grandfather at a ceremony from back in like 1910 or 1915. I'm like, oh, there's my grandfather, But I forget what the term is for like what you look like. It doesn't always represent your actual DNA or your actual,
right, right.
stuff. Because I've been to the Indian hospital over there. I've went to the Indian hospital. There was what appeared to be a white male nurse helping me in the emergency room. And then he bends over and looks around. And he tells me, like, gets by my ear and he's like, "You look like a white man." And I didn't know, I didn't really say anything because I was too sick at the time and stuff. But I thought, you know what? I should have said the same thing back to him, like, "So do you." But it's like, uh, you know, so a lot of times I'm passing. So I've been
I
on
got you.
every side of everything.
Have you
Uh,
ever have you has did your grandmother, because half my family's were witnesses and half were Catholic. Did your Catholic side ever tell you who were Yaqui God paints with many colors?
um, no, I mean, with my grandmother was very Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, not so much. He went to church just, I think, to make her happy, and he was raised in it. But I don't think his dad was a serious Catholic either. Although they did go to church and stuff, so they didn't really teach us that much. And then my dad was Catholic, but he never said anything. It's just when I was in seventh grade, they put me in parochial school in St. Daniel's Prophet in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Mm,
So that's when I started learning about being Catholic.
gotcha.
And that was a very white kind of school
Mm-hmm.
there in Scottsdale. There were a few Native Americans and a few Mexicans, but the majority were mostly white Catholics. So it was not like the Catholicism my dad grew up in Tempe at the Mexican church, you know.
Mm.
So, but
I got
it's like
I got a real
that's
quick
what.
question. Sorry about that. My quick question is this. Um, okay, so the reservation I used to live at in Lusagus, they actually accidentally or probably on purpose, who knows, because slept with their cousins on the accident, but all the families were so close. Do you think that could happen to the Yaquis or no? Because there's thousands of Yaquis throughout that region, even if they have to go to Mexico to get Yaqui wives and deal with the government paperwork, you don't think that can happen, or can it happen still if they try to just do what the
Oh,
United
I
States
think it
does?
happened all the time because, like I told you before, my grandparents were cousins
Okay.
on my dad's side, and my great grandparents were cousins, and my great great grandparents were cousins. So there's three generations of actually marrying their cousin. This one guy told me that does research and genealogy stuff. He said like it's probably because the Spanish ones, were like, hey, you have to marry somebody with enough Spanish and somebody with money and somebody with resources type thing. But I don't know that really was what it was, or they just married their cousins a lot because all these people I'm talking about were all mixed.
Right.
They were all young by that time,
Right.
and so kind of like in Tempe, you will have, uh, you can have the Gonzalez family living next door and they're Mexican. And then the guy's brother, who's Gonzalez, will live in Guadalupe, but he's Yaqui. But the brother in Tempe says he's not Yaqui. You know, so there's a
Well,
lot of that one on too. There's a there's a guy like in Guadalupe, exact same name as my grandfather's brother, same age, and he's Yaqui. And then you have where we were living in Tempe. It's like, back in the old days, it's like, I don't know if that's their first cousin or whatever, but it's kind of like when I was like going to high school, it's like, oh, we don't know you, we don't know who you are.
mhm.
But you know, I ran into that a lot. But most of the Mexican families or Yaqui Mexican families in Tempe, they're all mostly interrelated. The more I've traced them, the more that they all marry their cousins too.
Mm.
I mean, especially the ones in Tempe, you know. So it's like
And
if you go back, I do know like with my great grandmother's brothers, two of them went to. Let's see, where did they go to? I think they went to Sinaloa. I'm not sure to get
mhm,
wives. They actually went to Mexico, went there, got wives, got married, took pictures, and brought them back to the U.S.
mhm.
And this is like the 1880s or whatever. And I don't know why they couldn't have married just two women in, in Tempe. You know what I mean? But these are definitely Yaquis because on my great grandmother's side, there, that's the Noriegas. They're really Yaqui. I mean, they got probably more Yaqui than the Estrada side, which they married the Estradas.
Mhm.
You know, which is their cousin. So it's like,
Right, right.
and then the the people that the my great grandmother's uncle was married to my great grandfather's aunt, and those two that are married, the man, he's from an Opata
Mhm.
guy, so that means we got Opata in us too, I think.
I got you. Let me go over these real quick, and then we'll get back to more about the indigenous people. All right, some indigenous plants that were used in the Southwest by indigenous tribes is the jojoba, used for pulmonary problems. It's an anti-inflammatory for mucous membrane, for colitis, ulcers, hemorrhoids, and sore throats. Another one is flat top buckwheat, used as an antiseptic, as a gargle for sore throats. All right, and the last one that I got is real quick is broom snake weed. It helps with stomach aches, gastro problems, snake bites, and to reduce swelling. We'll put these up in the community area as I always do. If you have further questions about these, I can, do my research. Or if you have any questions for me or my co-host, or if you're trying to enroll in the Pascual Yaqui or tribe or any tribe, I could Google it, give you the telephone numbers, and we could move forward like that. My
Oh, can you say those three again? Just the names of those three?
jojoba, flat top, buckwheat, and broom snake weed. I'm going to put a picture of each of those, like I always do, in the community part of the Black Bear Medicine Bag. So you guys could go back and see more, and I'll put a little bit more information in the links and things like that, so you guys can learn about medicine that nobody's really talking about. Hey, if you're out there in the desert, if you just want to try something different, get back to your roots. I see a lot of native people out here talking, but when you ask about some of these things, nobody knows. So it's time for us to go back to the earth. Start going back, learning in certain ways. Now, you got the scripture you want to share before we end this
Um,
podcast?
no, I didn't go through all my notes today. I did want to say though, on the medicine stuff, there is a certain type of mesquite, the pods, and you get the beans out, and it's for stomach problems, stomach pain, heartburn, all that. I'll have to check with one of my. I think I can call one of my cousins, maybe know for next show, but because her dad, he showed me like, this is the one that you do if you have a stomach ache, and then there's also mesquite. There's like 14 or 17 type of mesquite trees. And he showed me another one. Like this one is just sweet, you know, if you want to eat like something sweet. I think there's another one they actually used to use at one point for tortillas.
Mm-hmm.
But so he's not alive anymore. But I'll try and call my cousin see if he remembers all that stuff.
Mm.
And as far as like, I know with myself, I did lose a lot of weight, and with I was diabetic, and I'm in remission. But one thing I did was the combination of black tea and green tea every day. And I know there's different ones, different types, which I probably went through different brands and stuff like that. Trying to see if I can look that up again. I used to have it all written down somewhere.
Okay. Well, we'll greatly appreciate you if you bring that back next time because you know me, I'm like to like just keep it an hour, keep it real short. But I do like the fact that you know we're getting closer to making this, and eventually, hopefully, we get it the next woman on. Hopefully, she says yes, right?
Yeah. Um,
Hopefully,
yeah.
we're hoping a co-host because I like to see the male perspective and the female perspective, especially in dealing with the native world, because there's not a lot of representation of us or mixed native blood as we are. There's not a lot of representation of that. That's walking in 3 worlds or 4 worlds, and we're not even talking about 2 spirit, which is a whole nother level. So yeah, and I would like to meet as many native nations with medicine to add to my medicine bag knowledge. And eventually, I'm going to go out and pick some of these things that we talked about. As you guys saw, I did a pine needle tea. So yes, I'm looking to get out in between the 574 nations and collect some of this and send it y'all's way. Eventually, if you guys want to reach me at YONA 317602 at gmail.com. Do you have an email you would like people to contact you or a Facebook page or anything like that, Peter?
Yeah, they just look out for my Facebook. You know, it's just Peter, then Connor, Conner, and then space, and then Estrada, Estrada. And Connor is just my mom's maiden name. I just use them both to, you know, kind of give honor to both sides. Because, like on my mom's side, there is a lot of native blood. It doesn't show up in my DNA anymore, but you know, it's a little further back. I think it was she. Let's see, she would be 13th great granddaughter of Pocahontas, but now they're disputing that, so there's a big argument there. And
Right. I'm going to get Pocahontas because that's Powhatan Nation. I know that much. I'm going to get her right name. I think her name was like Mata or something like that. But
Princess
one other.
Toka. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Passpatook, the Umchog, and the Shinnecock Nation of New York State, or the Wampanoag and Pequot?
Not that much. I just, you know, I did look at that up Mohawk stuff before because my grandfather said they were Mohawk, and you know, I know that was New York. And as far as the Oneida or Oneida, we always call them Oneida because my great grandmother was actually called like Oneida was her name, and they named her that so that she didn't forget. This is on my, not on the Connor side, on the Peyton side. They named her that so that she didn't forget that, you know, like that her grandmother was full blood from the tribe or whatever. And I'll have to look at the genealogy stuff on that again too. It's been a while because most of that genealogy on my mom's side was done by my first cousin's daughter and some other cousins over there. And I know one of them graduated from ASU, and then after she graduated, she did a big old thing. She did all the genealogy for them, you know, for my mom's side. And so it's all on Genie and it's all documented. They've got it back to, she did it all the way to Adam and Eve. Yeah.
What?
So, yep. So I don't have to do, then I thought like, oh, well, I guess I don't have to do any of these anymore. So then I came over and it's like, I'll work on the Mexican Yaqui side stuff and then start working on that. And then a person who's supposed to be my cousin in Tucson, and I don't remember how close a cousin, but yeah, she sent me a nice email and stuff, and then pretty soon it was attack after attack, like, oh, you're no longer related to Pocahontas. You're no longer related to, because like Japasaw or Ipasaw, which is Pocahontas's dad's brother, the Lesser Chief, the first one that had interaction with the English. Uh, Originally, I was like his 14th great grandson, but she's worked really hard to tear all that apart. She's worked with people in Utah that are at the records of the LDS Church. For some reason, I don't know, she's tried to make it so that I'm not related. And I didn't do that research, so I don't know why she's after me. It's like my first cousin's daughter did it. And I think one of my other first cousins, and I think a daughter of the other first cousin. So those two sisters, it's like their kids did it. But this woman in Tucson, she is, according to Genie.com, she's my cousin, and she just did everything she could to, you know, take me out of line from Ipasaw and Japasaw. Some people say Ipasaw, some say Japasaw, and to take me out of the line for Pocahontas. And also, just the other day, I checked it again. You know, like I was telling you, and found that Donald was my 25th cousin now, or whatever. But so some of it's being reinstated, but it's kind of some vendetta of this woman in Tucson, which says she's a cousin. And I also checked on there too, like Wayne Newton, the singer. He's my seventh cousin.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how he claims he's from Pocahontas too. So it's kind of like I don't know exactly if he is or not, because I'm related to him through my mom on dad's side. But my mom was actually married to Wayne Newton's mother's brother. That was her first husband. So I have a brother and sister from her first husband, which are Wayne Newton's first cousin. So I would be Wayne's step cousin through that relationship, you know. And then, but actually, my mom married her first husband was her cousin. So since Wayne is her seventh cousin, that means my mom's first husband was her sixth cousin, which I kind of figured that anyway from what she had told me in the history. And they are native, definitely, because I know my brother and sister and Wayne, their grandmother, um, you know, she was native. She was from Alabama. I'm not sure which tribe. But she's definitely
Creek.
native. I don't know. She's definitely in the tribe and native. And then she married uh, the man that she married, and they came to West Virginia.
Yeah,
And
definitely check into Muskogee Creek, and there, that's the red sticks, and then the white sticks. Or is it the blue sticks? Can't Coosa. That's the ones who remain are the Coosa band of creeks. There's so many different bands of creeks from um, what's it go down like what is it? Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, because they're all, and believe it or not, they were all Muskogean people, speaking people. So you got
yeah, I
Choctaw,
know.
Chickasaw, and Muskogee, and Coosa and other native nations that are Muskogean speak. And
I'll have to look it up, because to me it was like we didn't see him that much growing up. Once I was an adult, went visiting and went to Shenandoah and Casa de Shenandoah and stuff over there where Wayne lives. Yeah, with my brother, you know, went over there and stuff. And so Uncle Pat, that's Wayne's dad, and Aunt Evelyn's mother, but she had already passed away. But so Evelyn's mother, you know, is the one that was native. My brother probably knows. I'll ask him this weekend, and I call him. He's still on it, and
mhm.
you know, so he grew up in all that, but I don't know what the big push was to prove for Wayne to prove that he was related to Pocahontas, and it was a big issue.
What?
But I did all
Why
my
didn't you
research.
just enroll with the Palatins? Have you called the Palatins up?
I haven't, because I looked it up and I had heard that they weren't even a tribe anymore and stuff, and you
Mm.
know. But then I found someone who's actually a member of the tribe recently.
Yeah, I
Uh,
would call and just talk to them and say, hey, look, can you verify this ancestor? And
Oh, it's all documented to the guy that was a tribal historian. So
hmm
this cousin from Tucson, which uh, like has some kind of vendetta, like
hmm
um, she basically and the woman in Salt Lake City are saying like, no, that's not right. That guy that was a tribal historian for 30 or 40, 50 years till he died was wrong. He didn't know what he's talking about. There's all kinds of stuff online, but if you read it, you'll see like the Foleys. I'm from the Foleys. That's my great grandmother, my grandfather's mother,
hmm
and she was a Foley, and it goes back to basically, like I said, the one Foley guy was he was listed with his Indian woman, and I forget how far back that one is, and then. Uh, a lot of it's intermarried there too because there's a guy named Pal,
hmm
and then my aunt she married a guy named Powell, which is also Native American, and his mother used to babysit us when we were kids, and she was Native American, and they're all back there from like West Virginia, North Carolina, and stuff, and uh, there was one other. The Foleys were related to Pals, and so I think it's also some of the other names. They're all listed online. There's so many of them, and it's such a big mess because everybody's claiming it. And then, but the one guy from the tribe said, yes, this is the correct one. If he's correct, the guy that was a tribal historian and spent his life doing it, if he's correct, yeah, I'm the 14th great grandson of Japasaw or Ipasaw, and uh, I guess I would be like, I thought my mom was 13th great granddaughter of Pocahontas.
I
So,
got you. Did you know
yeah.
that Pocahontas' father had many, many children from many
Yeah.
different, like, because the Powhatan was like the big top of their confederation, but there were smaller little entity tribes that were part of them that I guess when I'm saying that a lot of people probably are like cousins of, you know what I'm saying, like distant
Yeah.
relatives of Pocahontas, but that's good that you could
Well, they
because
also
Pocahontas only had one son, according to
they,
history. She only had one son, so it's like that son must have returned back to his people after his mother died. He had to.
well the when I researched it too, I found out that they were doing a lot of since the women were basically it was matrilineal as far as the power and the chief stuff. That the men
hmm
were marrying the women more so they could get like a position of power, like I'm married to her, you know, and that's what I seem to find. Plus, I read tons of stuff about the Pettis family, which I'm from. I think the
hmm
Meads, uh, the Foleys, definitely straight line from the Foleys, and then the Connor line on my uh, my grandfather's side too. He's a Foley Connor. So on his dad's side, on the Connors, they're all mixed in too. And it's like uh, with the Bryants or the Bryans or whatever, Bryn or Br. I mean, they're even buried. Some of these people are buried on land in Virginia,
hmm
which members of my family still own. And
hmm
my mom went there about 20 years ago, I think. Last time she went, uh, like the family cemetery. It's online still, and shows right there. The one woman, whatever Bryant, she's supposed to be the one that comes down through the one Keoki, which they say, oh, that's not really Pocahontas's daughter, with Kokuum or Kokuum. And they say, oh, they never had a kid and stuff. Well, if you follow the line and the Pettis and then the Bryant, the woman's buried on land that's owned by like my fourth or fifth cousins in Virginia. They still own it. These people kept their land from 1763 till they still own it, as far as I know. I don't talk to them. My mom did, Uh, so 1763, it's like the first guy. He got the land because it was in the French Indian Wars.
hmm
He got the land. It's like a land grant reward for being a soldier. 1763. built his house, built a church, and he got like 100 acres or something, and then um, it much grew because they intermarried with all their neighbors around there, which also were people who mixed with natives, and so the cemetery's still there, and the woman Bryant that married into the family, which is supposed to be from Pocahontas' direct line too, and then that's the thing too, with that great grandfather on that side, he married his cousin who was a Foley. So uh, and even my brother, he went to Arkansas to get married, found him
Mhm.
a woman there, and turns out her great great grandfather is Red Foley the singer. Well,
Mhm.
Red Foley the singer is my great grandmother's first cousin. So he even ended up marrying his cousin.
Gotcha. So I hate to cut us off, but like I'm not trying to go over too much to wear the people down. So I want to tell everybody, stay in good health. Keep researching your ancestry if you're not enrolled. Keep making connections with native nations like me. And what else would you like to tell our viewers as far
Well,
as
I started, I didn't start like looking for the Yaqui stuff. I started with just doing family and genealogy as a hobby. And
Mhm.
the easiest way is get your free account on Family Search, which is run out of Utah, which there's nothing wrong with the people's, Salt Lake City, Utah.
What's that? What's the website or what's
That's
that?
the familysearch.com or .org. The one that's
Okay.
free through the LDS church, but you don't have to be LDS. And I'm not
Okay.
LDS. But
Oh,
that's the
gotcha.
best place to start. And then Ancestry, I got my DNA there, the DNA
Okay.
test.
Okay.
And that wasn't too expensive. I don't remember what it cost. It was like on sale then for like 35 bucks or something. But you
Gotcha.
learn a lot. I never thought, like, when I got it back and showed that I was Yaqui, or Mexican indigenous from Sonora,
That's the one that I
I
got. Sonora and Sinaloa. Is Sinaloa a Yaqui territory outside of the Terrauma, or Yaquis all over?
uh, it is Yaqui territory because remember, like I told you before, the Yaquis lived on the Yaqui River and the Mayas lived on the Maya River, and they used to, instead of marrying in their own clan or marrying too close in their tribe, they would marry with Mayas, which are more southern towards Sinaloa, and sometimes they would marry with the Huichol, which are even further southern down by Culiacan, and
Oh,
uh,
really?
yeah,
Mm.
so it's like I've heard stories that the Yaquis also came all the way up to uh, what is it here, Gila River in the
Hmm.
spring. They would come up to the Salt River in the spring and intermarry with women here, so that they weren't too much intermarrying in their own tribe. And a
Got
lot
you.
of the people too, if I don't know if you noticed, like you'll find a lot of Yaqui guys, that probably their family didn't intermarry too much in the tribe and did go on the outside because they'll be like 6'5", a lot of
Okay.
them, and some rather
So they're
big
tall natives.
men. And the height comes because they didn't marry too close in their tribe. And my brothers, I'm not so tall. I'm 5'10", but my brothers are like 6'5", 6'4", 6'4",
Hmm.
and like 6'1". Uh, and I went over there to Guadalupe for my first language class and run into a lot of guys that are like 6'5". It's like, so they were not marrying their cousins. If they're marrying their cousins too close, they'd be like, you know, much shorter. Or if you married too much Spanish, the Spaniards that came, you read those old records from U of A. It's like a lot. The descriptions, a lot of those Spaniards, 5 foot tall, 5'3". You
Mm.
know, they were very small. The ones that actually seemed to come and intermix in Sonora, and that were the Presidio of Tubac and the Presidio of Tucson,
What
and some of
native
the
nation? Because I have a grandfather by the last name of Bassos, Frank Bassos. What native nation lived in Tubac? What native nation was
oh,
living
Tubac
there?
was originally Tubac. They just called them Pima, but
Oh,
they were the Tohono, they were the same ones as the border people. Tubac, the Spaniards would call them Pima. Pima just means river, but we're all
hmm.
river people. We're Yaqui River, Mayo River, Gila River, Salt River. So Pima is just another word for river.
And what's
So
Tubac?
Tubac is the, let's see, El Presidio San Ignacio de Tubac, 1775, I think it says there, but it was actually built in 1751. And that's where I was told to look first for the first guy that I was supposed to be from. And I went to Tubac 2 or 3 times. They built it in 1751. The first guy, one of the first 10 guys that went to building the fort, the first buildings for the Spanish army was Bartolo Estrada. Now, Tempe Historical Museum told me that that was supposed to be my great grandfather or something like that, but I can't find the connection. And then his brother Simon Estrada was there too, and then his brother had a son named Felipe Estrada, which ended up at San Agustin, or what is it, San Agustin de Tucson, which is Tucson, Presidio, which they're trying to restore that a little bit more nowadays. But so it's all basically, they would just call them Pima. The ones that were closer to Tubac that got chased away by the Apaches, they went and lived north of north of Tucson. That's what they call the Papago Indians. Those are the ones that gave the Yaquis the reservation land. So some of them, when they left Tubac and during the big invasion and raids of the Apache, came to the Salt River and lived on the Salt River too. And that was in Tempe. And that was, I think, 1840s or something. And they came back to Tucson in 1856 and they wanted their land back. And the Spanish general was still there. He couldn't help them. And the Americans that were taking over, they said, we can't help you either. So some stayed there in that San Xavier del Bach church, and some came back to Tempe. Some, I don't know. You know, they didn't go back to Tubac because the Apache raids were just too horrendous for the Spaniards to handle. And this is from Friars, Soldiers, and Reformers. It's a little booklet you can get through U of A online digitally. It's a great book, tells a lot of the history of the Southwest there. A lot of stuff that you don't hear about.
Well, thank you for that information. We're going to get back because what we're going to try to do is do this 2 times a week and try to see where we can go, how big. I'm going to try to reach some of the fairly recognized tribes in Indiana and Michigan. I'll make my way all the way up to Arizona. So we can get some connections on the Pima Res, the Yaqui Res, Hopi, the Nan.
Hopi has a sister tribe, the ones I mentioned earlier, the Huichol tribe, and that's south of the Mayos in Mexico, and more in Sinaloa. Those Huichols are a sister tribe to the Hopi, which are in northern Arizona. They speak the same language.
Okay. All right. Don't mind talking to them. All right.
And I actually had a girlfriend that was from that area in that tribe. So that's how I know that.
Oh, I got you. All right. Well, I'm signing off. You have a great night. I'm going to tell you in Cherokee at Donadagi. Until we meet again, family, friends, new acquaintances. Take care. Be well.
Okay, you too. Well, Yosem Chani Avu Ketamalera. Yosem Yokue Utesias.
Take care.
So may the Lord bless you and keep you, basically. And may he shine his face down upon you. That is basically the real translation. The same as the Jewish blessing. So we'll continue next week then.
All right, next week, same time, same place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye-bye. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.